The fairer the skin, you're considered to be more beautiful or more handsome. I wasn't considered very beautiful when I was growing up.
Hello!
Hi.
This is Rathees from Sri Lanka. You were born in Sri Lanka, grew
Yes.
up in India and Bangladesh, and then you moved to the US and you also lived in Australia for 3 years. What about the food, your favorite?
My favorite food is Malaysian food. Malaysian food has a combination of like Chinese, Malay and Indian food as well. So it's a little bit of a mix of everything, like Malaysian food. They use coconut milk as well.
Yes.
For some of the food. The seafood in Malaysia too. So
Is it the Chinese style
the
seafood?
Chinese style, yes.
I know.
The crab.
Yes, I know.
Oh,
It's very
so
famous.
good. I'm used to traveling a lot, so I didn't really end up, learning to cook. It's better for me to just pay someone to do the job correctly. But during the pandemic, I actually learned to cook a few things. It's very popular with my friends. So one of them is the chicken curry and the other one is the lentil curry.
You have been living in so many countries. Is there any hidden rule in each country that surprised you?
I can tell you about many things that surprised me in Australia. I was very surprised and shocked to learn that the cafes close at 3:30 p.m. For a major city like Sydney, the malls close at 6 o'clock and you're like, what?
They want to kick everyone back to their family and spend time with family.
They will take their work-life balance a little bit so seriously. Because Australia has higher salary, it takes significant amount of money for them to staff malls, to keep them open. And they have to have enough people to actually go to the malls. Is mainly, I think, it's based on cost. The benefit. Hidden rule in the US. People like their personal space, I would say. Maybe that's not much of a hidden rule, but I feel like in certain parts of Asia, there is no concept of personal space.
What's the beauty standard in Sri Lanka? When I traveled there, I was asked 3 times to take a photo with the locals.
So I think in that part of the world, beauty standards are dictated by the color of your skin. The fairer the skin, you're considered to be more beautiful or more handsome. People put a lot of weight behind fair skin. From a very young age, you could see it. Even today, you can see it like advertisements everywhere. They sell creams to make your skin fairer, right? And
But it's the same here. You cannot imagine.
So I wasn't considered very beautiful when I was growing up.
I also have a question. If now you go to India and when you speak, the locals can hear you have American accent. Will they treat you different and then sell you more expensive?
Also the way I dress as well, right? Because I'm not dressed like a local as well. So, and when I speak, they can hear my accent. So they definitely do treat me very different.
Indian accent?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to understand.
But that's right. I grew up speaking English. So I knew English before, I went to the US. But then, even then, I found it really difficult communicating with local Americans because they were speaking so fast. I didn't keep up. So they have their own slangs. And then in the last 3 years, I live in Australia, and that's a whole different English. What are you talking? Then you get used to the language.
Chinese Mandarin in Taiwan and China, it's so different. Even difficult for me to understand because of the very strong accent.
Right.
I need to ask them to repeat 2 to 3 times.
Wow. Yeah.
Why did you choose living in the US but not Australia? Personally, I lived in Australia for 2 years. I really like the chilled atmosphere there and the work-life balance, and people are approachable and friendly, easygoing.
So I think you had a very different experience than I did in Australia, and that probably has to do with a lot of different factors, like gender, for example, also the type of jobs from what I was used to in the US. We get things done, we move fast. That Australia has higher taxes and the cost of living, but I felt in US you have more options. There are also other places like Dallas, for example, or Atlanta, where you're still in a big city, but your cost of living is not as high. For me, it was much easier to make friends in the US. People always opened up their house, or I'll meet someone random and they invite me to their house for their barbecue, and then I meet their neighbors, their cousins, and their friends. My first year living in Sydney, I experienced a really hard time socializing with people, young age, and they kind of tend to stay in that same circle of friends. Again, gender is, I think, is part of the challenge, and also age group. I think when you're younger, it's a lot easier to make friends. And I would say maybe that's why it was easier for me to make more friends in the US, because, I was younger when I arrived in the US. So
you can pretend you're younger. The Asians look younger.
That's true. If you like this video, please subscribe and like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you consider you're more Sri Lankan or Indians or people from Bangladesh?
I have actually now lived most of my life in the US, and then I'm an American citizen, so I always introduce myself as I'm an immigrant American. I spent about 9 years in Sri Lanka, 9 years in Bangladesh, and 2 years in India. And then more than 23 years, in US, and then about 3 years in Australia. I feel more American than anything else, but I also feel, I'm a product of everything. I can connect with people from different cultures very easily.
In the Hollywood movie, in the US, you go to a bar and then you just talk to the people next to you, and then you can have a long conversation.
Absolutely. I think I have met some of my close friends through going to random bars.
It's not the case in Taiwan and Hong Kong. People probably would think you are very strange. Is there any misunderstanding people have to Sri Lanka?
I think it's maybe not particularly about me being born in Sri Lanka, but I think people have a misconception about me from India, for example, based on my skin color, right, and features. They can think, oh, you're from India, and then I'll say, yeah, I'm close to India. My ancestors were from India. Some people think that, that I'm from somewhere from Africa. People definitely judge me in certain ways. You can't judge a book by its cover. People are very different, even if they're from the same country. I think it taught me to see people differently. I do my best to not judge anyone based on the color of their skin, or where they're from, or even their social economic status.
What made you start to use couchsurfing?
I was introduced to couchsurfing more than 10 years ago through some hikers that I met in some random hiking trail somewhere in the western part of US. In Sydney, I experienced a really hard time socializing with people. I basically logged back into couchsurfing and decided to see, okay, let me try. And I'm glad I did, because through the couchsurfing platform. So it was a great way for me to connect with people, experience, different culture, listen to their stories, and it's always nice to have a conversation with someone that is local. I think you learn a lot more and you see a city very differently when you interact with someone that is local.
What's the strangest message you have ever received from couchsurfing?
Oh, it's usually something about massages, offering free massage.
And it's always from men, right?
That is right. So my advice to everyone is always, make sure you read the profiles very carefully. Things like references that you can, use. Look at their photos. Avoid strange people like that.
Let me think about it.
Closing questions?
Closing questions. Have you been to Australia or the US? Do you really think Aussie, they are all friendly and approachable? Let us know. Bye.